mann som öklar bruk och snusbullar.
Hello YouTube, hello world, it's Shauna once again with Disrupt Apps, and moving right along with this series. Today's topic is going to be about language modeling and a basic, basic introduction to language. And we won't be doing any coding, but we're going to talk about linguistics and language, and because I'm a native English speaker, I'll be dealing with kind of like the English language only. A lot of this is a universal function of language and linguistics. I speak with this with some experience because I was an English teacher and I have 4 years teaching English in Japan. So on top of all the other stuff I've done over my career in science, technology, and information technology. So with that, I want to talk about linguistic models and modeling. And I guess the first thing I want to do is I want to come into our project folder, and we're going to use this later on. And we'll come into our JavaScript, and let's go ahead and create a JavaScript file named, go ahead and call it rand cont gen, and that's going to stand for random content generator .js. Okay, and we won't be doing any coding today, but I'm going to be putting up my screen and talking about the topics as I go line by line. This topic I've already have pre-planned out. So what I'll do is I'll open up the random content generator, and in here I'm just going to be putting I'm just going to comment everything out as I discuss everything about the basics of language modeling. And so with that, let's get started. So you can ask yourself, what is the purpose of language? And well, that's kind of a stupid question, but it's also a deep question. And we just talk every day without really thinking about why we do it. But it's about communication, right? We need to communicate a point across to somebody. But I want you to think about humans. We humans, we are nothing but a biological machine. We want to think ourselves the apex predator. We're some ordained species who's created this yada yada yada. We are a biological machine. We are an animal, just like every other species on this planet. And humans have two baseline fundamental goals above everything else, and that is 1, to survive, and 2, reproduce and create progeny to continue the species. Beyond that, the whole purpose of life, there is no purpose in life. And I'm not going to get into a philosophical tangent, but you need to understand that as an organism, we need things to survive, right? We need mechanisms. We need biological mechanisms in place. And that's why we have like the autonomic nervous systems that we don't have to think, and we just react without, like if we touch a hot stove or if we see danger, we don't think. Our body takes over it. So we have inbuilt mechanisms, right? I don't want to go deep into the biological realm, but at the cellular level, we're trying to compete and stay alive. And everything, all of our systems in our body function together to perpetuate and to keep life going, our own lives, right? So one of the things that humans developed, and to a lesser degree animals, rudimentary animals, they have some sort of communication system or linguistics or language or sounds. Through evolution, we figured out that making random noises, that helps us survive. That helps us to perpetuate the species, right? And as we evolved, as humans evolved, our vocal cords evolved, and we figured out, well, we can make these different noises and sounds to represent different things in different states and different conditions, right? Language at its core is about expressing some sort of need or desire to live. Okay? And we're going back to rudimentary people. language is about humans expressing vocally or with sound, I can't type, with sound, some sort of need or desire. And we associated sounds with objects and actions. Now you gotta think way back, like caveman days. You can't think about like what we have now in this posh, easy food, whatever, technological. You gotta think way back in the day when we were out in the bush, right? Hunting our food and picking and stuff like that. So we figured out as part of an evolutionary process that we can associate sounds with objects and actions in order to survive. Coming in here, the next point I want to make, humans are self-centered. It's all about survival. So the first language, the first sounds will always be simple and to meet their biological survival. And so rudimentary languages are thus so simple, right? The language that we have now as an advanced species with technology is built on millennia of refinement and other things. But when it comes down to it, sounds are part of the evolution that kept us alive, associating sounds with, again, objects and actions, right? So let's go ahead and start with some really simplistic examples. I'm going to go ahead and copy here, paste it. So simplistic expressions and sentences. And that is going to be, at the rudimentary level, it's going to be a subject and a verb. Because what do humans do? The human's first thought is me. I need to survive. And what do I need to do? I need to do a verb, right? And again, I'm taking this from the context, from the perspective of an English speaker, right? So let's dump in a couple of simple sentences, right? I eat, I sleep. Okay? And I is always the source. In any language that you learn, who comes first? Numero uno always comes first. So I eat, I sleep. I gotta take care of myself first. So it's going to be me as a subject and some verb that's going to keep me alive, right? So in English, this is a rudimentary sentence. We don't use that. We expand on what we're trying to say. But if you spoke this to somebody, I eat, I sleep, people would understand what this means, right? But we're more than just a one-dimensional creature. Humans do lots of crazy stuff, right? We do crazy things, all right? So we need to get away from a basic sentence structure, and we can add things like a conjunction, which you learned back in school. Conjunctions, right? Like and, or, but, as, things like that. And for this discussion, I want to use and, all right? So learning to use a conjunction and, or whatever language it is, using some sort of sound marker, and you add that to whatever language you have, I eat and I sleep. So now we are expanding the understood complexity of what a human animal does. So we can convey this to others who were in our tribe. So going back to what the purpose of any organism, what its purpose in life is, it's to survive long enough to reproduce the species. So knowing that, and with that, and since humans desire to survive, there is the need for words like for an idea, for a concept of must or need, or have some sort of expression, as well as a conditional statement. This gives rise to the need of adjectives or a state of being, because I'll get into this shortly, but we are one of the few species who understands the concept of past and future. So, as a human, what do? We get hungry and we get tired. So we got to plan our lives around these two things. We got to eat and we got to sleep. If we don't eat, we die. If we don't sleep, we die. And then The other one we have to do is we have to drink. We have to drink water, or we don't die, or we don't live, we die. So, with that, with the must or need to concept that we have, getting back to our rudimentary language up here, I hungry, I must eat. I tires or I tired, I tire, I need sleep. So looking at this as a modern English speaker, this is not grammatically correct. But if you said I hungry, I must eat, I tire, I need sleep, we understand what needs to happen because we've long associated I as me, hungry, I need food, must means the need, I have to do it, or else I die, eat, right? So this is laying the groundwork for other things to come, linguistically speaking. So moving on, so next up, I'll go ahead and paste this. So the human animal realizes that it is part of an environment. So it realizes that it needs to name external things with sounds, external places and situations and actions. Actions means verbs. So it can communicate its need to survive. Thus, the invention of the word place, or the concept of a place and associating a sound with it, and the adjective safe, or the concept of safe, and the human meaning to not be harmed and to survive. So this is a spatial awareness that creates what is called a linguistic target. Like if you remember back to your basic English, you have direct and indirect objects. This is the fundamental evolutionary basis of an object. And I'll get to that with an example here in a minute. So with those basic examples up here, you can see that in our modern English language, they are not grammatically correct, but the message is implied. We know what we know because we're human. We know what the other human desires. And we have certainly encountered this type of basic language when dealing with non-native speakers of English. And I came across this a lot when I lived in Japan. You know, some Japanese didn't speak the best English, but they spoke broken English and I understood what they meant. And the same thing when I spoke my broken Japanese to them. You know, we got the point across, right? And I'm sure that in your existence as a human here in America, or whatever English-speaking country you have, and you've dealt with, you know, non-native English speakers, you probably ran into people who spoke like this, and we get the point. So moving on. So what do humans do? We move around a lot. We do stuff. And we have possessions that we need to survive. You know, tools. I mean, tools are what got us to where we are today with our semiconductors and smartphones and trains and all that kind of stuff, mass production. But back then, humans needed a tool to survive, like a stick, right? Or they needed clothes. So humans moved around a lot, and they had possessions that they carried or have nearby. And they needed to survive, they needed a spatial awareness. And so parts of speech or sounds were developed in order to associate that concept of spatial awareness for the parts of speech that we have now today that we call like prepositions and location markers. A few examples really quickly. This is a real basic overview. So a few examples are to, on, over, by, and you can think of in, on, in, beside, all that kind of stuff. But we're sticking to the basic concepts here of evolutionary linguistics. A hungry human might say, I see apple by tree. Okay? The human sees an apple because it's hungry and it wants to eat. So we have our I, we have our, we call it a pronoun, right? There are ourself. We have a verb, see, because we need to look around to find food. We found the subject, apple, and then by is the location, right? It's the location marker, and then tree is the object. And so I need to survive. I see apple by a tree. I'm going to go pick it up and eat it. I'm going to go pick it and eat it. So we see an apple by a tree. But because humans are aware that there is a future, we also needed to develop sounds that would represent the concept of wants, needs, and conditionals. And that's how they come into play. Like if, want, and need. So expanding upon I see apple by tree, I see apple by tree. I want apple if I hungry. This may seem gibberish, but, if we rearrange that, let's put if I hungry, I want apple, I see apple by tree. So this is rudimentary, right? We can grunt this out millions of years ago or whatever. So we can kind of see if I see, if is a conditional. If, we need to eat. I need to find food to survive. So if I see an apple, I eat. So if I see safe place, I sleep. And that's why we've linguistically evolved these concepts of conditionals and wants, because I need to eat and I need food, and if it shows up, I'm going to eat it to stay alive. Okay, next up, humans. Humans, like I mentioned before, we are an organic machine. We are a biochemical machine. We function with like a cause and effect. That's how we operate at a rudimentary level. There is no mystic magic to it, right? We're a mechanist organism. Okay, so with that, and all of our biochemicals in our body were evolved for us to survive. It's all about cause and effect. It's all about signal and an output and a feedback loop. So humans live in a cause and effect world. We understand past actions caused past results. So the human animal developed the concepts, the linguistic concepts and sounds that represent past, present, and future states. So thus the state of being, like in English, am, be, was, will be, were created. And some really simplistic examples: I was hungry, I am hungry, I will be hungry. And this is because we as humans know and understand past, present, and future. And some animals kind of understand that, but the vast majority do not. And that's why we plan. And that's why we have languages. That's why we have words and sounds to represent these. And of course, because English is weird, verbs vary on their spelling rules, right? I slept, I sleep, I will sleep. And of course, we understand of the present doing something, and that's where the present progressive comes in. That's where the ing is, right? I am sleeping, I am sleeping, I am eating, I am hunting, things like that, because we're in the middle of doing something. So putting these things together, so from these really simple basic sentences, these really rudimentary grammar and sounds, humans can add additional information they feel are relevant to survival. And then building upon this, let's look at this sentence. Cold, I must go in cave and I must make fire. Again, this is using really basic stuff that we're learning here. So cold, we, as a human, as the English speaker, we know this is not grammatically correct, but we can infer what is going on here. Cold. Okay, well, that human is either cold from the weather or lacks clothing. I must go in cave. We know, well, I need to go in a cave and I must make a fire to stay warm. And these are all built on everything that we've talked about so far from an evolutionary linguistic survival point of view. And I think let me go ahead and copy this here, and I think I just covered this point. So even though this sentence is still not grammatically correct, we as a fellow human animal naturally understand we need warmth and can imply that the weather is cold and fire is needed inside a cave to stay warm so we can stay alive. So mixing in the desire for the human animal to survive, that the human being knows there is a future to come, the conditional if and the potential state of something will require some sort of cause and effect relationship. And let me go ahead and kind of expand on that. If cold and if rain, I go in cave, be warm and make fire. Again, grammatically not correct, but you can get the context of what is going on here and what needs to happen from a evolutionary and survival point of view. So we can see that more complex structures can be formed, and eventually through aeons we have our modern English grammar that we use today. But it seems maybe we're going backwards with text messaging and AI and shorthand. So with English, in the case of English, this gave rise to the many verb tenses that are time and conditional based forms. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste here. So the verb tenses, we have simple present, conditional, which is the SES. We have the present progressive or present continuous, which is the ING. We have the past perfect, which is when you get into had, ed, and then future simple, will, eat, will sleep. The future continuous will be eating, will be hunting, and future perfect will have been, will have done, right? Will have slept, will have farmed. And you can see that through the evolutionary need to survive, humans can develop, let me go ahead and say here, we can develop a past, a present, I can't type, and a future. And so what is happening here is we have all these grammar points that go in here to the past, present, or future in our modern advanced linguistics, right? And moving right along. In the modern English, we have prepositions that further enhance what we are trying to communicate as far as like time and locations for survival. And again, I mentioned prepositions earlier, but like to, on, and over. So going with our caveman example, if cold and if rain, I go in cave, be warm and make fire. We know what you mean. If cold and if rain, I go into cave to be warm and make fire. So rudimentary understanding, more refined English grammar that we know in the modern world. And as language, syntax, grammar, punctuation, clauses, and complexity evolved, we can get a more nuanced understanding of the intent of the human animal. So coming with something that's more grammatically correct. If it's cold and raining, I will go into the cave to be warm and make a fire. So we've gone from this rudimentary stuff to this, grammatically correct sentence that we speak. So with modeling, I'm not talking about large language models yet or using mathematics and statistics, but just in general linguistic modeling, it is about taking the bare bone components of subject and verb and building upon those and expanding them. But language always starts selfishly to meet the needs of the human animal. That's why language always has an internal and external point of referencing. That's why we have a past, present, and continuous present and future tenses. That's why we have conditionals. Language is built upon the fundamental need of survival. And in today's modern age, our survival, let me go ahead and type this. This is very crucial to what's to come. In our modern world of mass production, technology, economics, and money. We had to survive. And now our entire, way back when we were just living in caves and hunting and we turned into hunter-gatherers, right? We built our language in relation to our environment of the time. And now in the modern world, we're no different. We've evolved and adapted our linguistic patterns to match the modern world of mass production, technology, economics, and money. Think about what you talk about every day. It's your job. How much money do I have? How do I get to work? How do I get to school? Our entire linguistic model is devoted to surviving in our economic system. And that is why big tech loves AI. That's why they love their large language models. That's why they scrape and steal and invade your data, because they need all of your stuff, all of what you're talking about, what you hairless apes are out there chattering and whining and complaining about. They need all that data so they can put it for their economy and control you with money. That's what this is. That's what AI is all about. It's about money and controlling you. And I'm laying that out here, everything here, because they're taking advantage of your survival, your need to survive. So let me get back on course. As humans' emotions evolved, ability to think grew deeper and wider. Our language grew with it, as did the complexity. Humans have gone from simple sound structures to complex sentence structures, using a widened vocabulary to emphasize their position, their status, or education level within their constructed hierarchy and societies, as well as for labor specialization, as I talked about in our modern economic system. So to kind of do a review, simplistic language modeling. And I'm going to put the examples that we used in this topic. I eat, subject verb. I eat and sleep, subject verb plus, we'll say and, subject verb, and is a conjunction. If I see apple, I eat. Conditional, I need to survive. If this happens, I will. Subject, myself. Verb, see, I need to find food. That's why I evolved an eye. That's why I have a cornea and a retina. And so I have rods and cones, and that's why I have nerves that go to my brain and tell me that this apple, target, I need to target the apple to eat. Once again, subject, me, eat, verb. And then we grow spatial awareness. I see apple by tree. Subject, I, verb, see. And then we have apple. We need to say that is, I forgot to put here, that's a target. We have by, which is a preposition or target location modifier. Tree, target. That's a location, right? And then let's come and talk about I was hungry, I am hungry, I will be hungry. Subject. Then we have a variable tense state of being verb, which is all, these are all sounds and grunts and groans and stuff we're making. And then we have our adjective or adverb. And then of course we have our present progressive or ing or present continuous. I am sleeping. Subject, present progressive. Next up, cold, I must go in cave and I must make fire. So we have an external motivator, cold, subject, I. And this isn't the imperative enhancer, is something I just kind of thought up. Must go. The imperative enhancer is the must or need. It says, hey, I need to do this to survive. Verb is go. We have in, which is a directional or a preposition. Cave, target. And conjunction, subject, I. Imperative enhancer, hey, I need to survive. Must, verb, make, target, fire. And then coming down here to the grammatically correct one. If it's cold and raining, I will go into the cave to be warm and make a fire. And you could even say to become warm. And that implies a future, right? So we have our, what I call a future conditional dependent clause, which is if it's cold and raining, meaning in the future, if it's this, if it's this condition, I'm going to do this, right? And you have here future potential action. I will go into the cave, which is, verb and preposition tandem, go into the target, the cave, and you have the conjunction and preposition to become, I didn't have become before, but state of being, warm. And then we have another conjunction, and verb make, target, a fire. So this has been, I tried to lay this out the best that I could through linguistic evolution and modeling linguistic behavior. And again, trying to do this as an overview here. As I mentioned before, again and again, humans have two functions: to survive long enough to reproduce, to perpetuate the species and create progeny. And again, in our modern technology, in our modern system, right, in our modern world, we no longer fight over sticks and stones and fire, but we fight over status and cars and paychecks and jobs and ego and all that kind of stuff. But it all comes down to survival, and that's the way humans evolved language. We turn rudimentary concepts and sounds into this verbose and elegant speaking pattern that we now have all across the world in various languages all around the world. So I laid all this as a foundation to understanding language models. And with mathematics and science and statistics, that's what large language models are based upon. And with modern computing, because you can't just put a bunch of random words into a computer and it's going to spit out anything worthwhile. It's not going to, a computer has no comprehension. But the thing with AI and big tech is they've basically stolen all of our data, everything we've talked about for decades now. And they've scanned centuries, millennia of books, and they've put it into language models. They've put whatever kind of crap you're typing into your text and what you're saying on your web apps or your video chats or whatever. They're taking all your crap that you're saying and they're comparing it to everything that is out there. And that's how they can use statistics, and they can use relative keywords to have a high probability of what you're going to say. Because the reality is, humans talk about the same stuff over and over and over and over again. And what do we talk about? Money, food, sleep, reproduction, buying stuff, selling stuff, going on vacation. We talk about the same crap over and over and over again. And when you can take real-time data and scrape data and compare it to huge data sets, they can manipulate you. And that's how they can make these linguistic models that mimic human speech, right? And it's all based on math, model sets, and probabilities, and learning your behavior, learning you, the person watching this video, knowing your habits, your buying habits, your traveling habits, your sleeping habits, your food habits, your whatever habits. That's why they can do what they do with these models. With this random content generator, I will be building out grammatically correct models to show you the basics of language models. And maybe I might get into math, but at this point with this random content generator, I'm not interested in creating an artificial intelligence language model. That's not my intent. I could probably figure it out. I don't want it, I'd design it on my own from scratch, but I don't have the huge computing data sets to run it through to create the statistical probability to make it happen. But again, that's beyond scope of what I want to do with this random content generator application. So with that, I hope you find this really interesting. I find it astounding that we humans, as biological machines, figured out how to make sounds to symbolize concepts so we could survive. Anyhow, with that, my voice is getting scratchy and I need to get a drink, and I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.